once we learned how to do it, then we got like the guy that puts out the chips on the dice table. So not much of a job, but it's a job. I think we got $22.50 a day, which was pretty good money, as it turns out. At that time, this is 1959, 1960. But I got really bored with that, and being in Vegas was like being in Washington D.C. later. Nobody knew anything about automobiles, and they didn't talk about automobiles. So I wasn't interested in being there, because that's really was on the front of my mind. So I go back to New Orleans, and Jerry Seal, the guy lived down the street that I graduated from high school with. He had a 39 coupe, 39 two-door sedan.
These would all be Fords, right?
Yeah. I mean, Chevrolet. My dad had a Chevrolet, 41 Chevrolet, but that was the only Chevrolet within any semblance of closeness.
But kids didn't want anything to do with anything but Fords, right?
Well, there wasn't anything else. And the Oldsmobile changed all that in '49. The Oldsmobile was an acceptable piece, but they were expensive. Fords were cheap and they were plentiful, and if you took all the parts off of them and got them light enough, they were fast. So you could have a good time and race around and what have you. So I went back to New Orleans, and Jerry introduced me to a guy I had gone to high school with who was a year ahead of me. His name was Gene Zeller. And he had purchased a new K88 from Scotty Finn. And in the garage was the former cue ball whale belly tanker that he ran a Chrysler in. Gene had put a Chevy in it with 6 carburetors, and he had used it up. It was essentially worn out. I talked him into letting me use it, but for the opportunity to use it, I helped him on the K88.
And the K88 was a chassis made in Los Angeles.
Yeah, it came in on the truck, and these are the pictures. This is the first and only run on that engine. That's out of a 8mm film.
Okay.
And then these are the photographs. This is November 1960 when we finished the car, and it's turned out. I mean, it's purple and chrome, and it was a 354 with Gene built a 1/2-inch stroker. He welded it down at Emil Vergadama's shop. But these are the photographs. You can handle those when you get the opportunity.
All right.
We spent about 3 months hand finishing that car. We scraped off all the weld and polished it. And, it was really beautiful. It was candy purple and chrome. And we took it to Biloxi for the first race, the maiden race. And apparently he had measured the pistons and or the connecting rods wrong, because the pistons hit the head at high speed and broke the rod and made a mess of everything. And this was a block that we had prepared like Chrisman does, with all the shiny, it looked like porcelain and what have you. And that was really disappointing. The K88 I mentioned was a complete car with steering wheel, steering box, everything but wheels.
And shipped out from Scotty Finn's shop in Los Angeles.
Narrowed rear end with no center section, because we put a quick change in it. And I think it was $345 for the chassis, and $50 for the shipping or something like that. And it came on a truck, and we put it together and spent a fortune on chrome, maybe $500 on chrome. But it was a nice car, And in the garage was this cue balls car. And I'm antsy. I want to drive that sucker. So I talk him into letting me drive it. So we get it out and hook it up to the back of my, what did I have? I bought a 40 Ford coupe from Gene. That was my daily beater. And I put a trailer hitch on it, and we hooked that car up and took it to Houma, Louisiana. Now this was a drag strip that, and this is a sidebar because it's interesting and relevant. The place was run by Gordon Novell. Gordon Novell was one of the guys that Jim Garrison was chasing around New Orleans trying to find him during the Kennedy investigation. And apparently, from what I'm told, and I have some first-hand information, but nothing really hard evidence, that the reason he got that piece of property to run the races in was to get him access to the armory that was next door, because they were stealing guns out of the armory and shipping them to Cuba during the Cuban thing. And he offered me an opportunity to drive a boat full of weapons, and I turned him down. Other guys didn't. Some of the drag racers of the same genre took him up on it. But I don't know anything more than that. That was the extent of my involvement. Anyway, I take this car to the drag races, and I'm hot shoot, man. I get in this thing.
And this is Cue Ball Will's car.
Cue Ball's old belly tanker that Gene bought and raced with the Chevy in it.
Okay.
And it ran in the 10s and about 140 in the early 50s. He went from a 34 coupe with a Chrysler in it to this dragster. He ran a competition, and I think I might have a picture of that coupe around, right to the dragster. And it was Whale and Maloney was his partner. And then, after he used that car, he won a lot of races with, because he was essentially the only dragster around. I think there was a couple of guys from western Louisiana that raced, Estabrook and places like that, other drag strips, Opelousas. But he was the only dragster in New Orleans. And he sold that car to Gene and bought a TE 440.
Which is an earlier Scotty Finn chassis.
Right. It's the one with the biscuit front end. And I used to hang around a lot with Cue Ball, and he was kind of like a hero to me. And this is the first time I ran into a problem with Wally Parks, because the TE 440, about the time that they wrote that Scotty had written the 20 questions, the famous 20 questions of Wally Parks and the NHRA as to where the money goes and what is the NHRA doing and all of this stuff. They outlawed the biscuit front end, so Cue Ball had to saw that off the front of his car and put a spring. And so he took the biscuit and put it in a big jar of Vaseline and shipped it to Parks. That was the start of the whole thing. And we all got sideways with the NHRA because of that, and the fact that when we finally got to Laplace to start racing, the NHRA came to town with one of their meets and wouldn't let us run any fuel. And that was a sin.
Because the nitro ban has been on now for some time.
Yeah, it started in late '57, and the nitro ban had been on, and Cue Ball ran gasoline. But the fact that they'd come to town and say, you can't run it, and other guys were running it in different classes.
And this is what year now?
This is 58, 59, right in there. Mm-hmm. And that was... Cue Ball was my hero, so I kind of fell in with him and his outlook and his attitude toward things in general. I mean, when your hero does something, that's where you end up. So that led to me dealing with Gene with the K88 and then into the Cue Ball's old dragster. And now we're at Homa, and I'm going to drive this thing for the first time. I get there pretty early. I mean, I'm like the fourth car in line to get in. And I've got Billy Fats Ryan with me to drive the push car to get me cranked up. And I know essentially nothing about this car. I fit in it, and I worked the shifter, and I worked the steering wheel. And Gene had told me how to drive it. And so I get in it, I hook up the belt, I pump the pressure up to 6 pounds. I have Fats push me up to speed 30 miles an hour or so. I let the clutch out. You understand that the clutch pedal is on the bell housing. So it's a tremendous push to get that sucker in. So you got to lock your knee to hold the clutch in. So once I got the clutch out and I got relaxing, now the motor's turning over. I light the ignition, turn the fuel on, start pumping it to keep the pressure on. Turn it around and warm it up. Everything feels good, looks good. I put it in gear and move it a little bit. Okay, we're ready to go. So it's time to make the first run. So we push down, same procedure. Pump the pressure with the fuel shut off, pump the pressure into the tank up to 6 pounds. Understand that the fuel tank was up front. The pressure pump was inside the cab. The line came from up front, rubber line, came up to the pump, back to the carburetors. And the shifter was such that right here was high gear. So you had to essentially hit yourself in the chest with the shifter to get it in the high gear. So we push off, I fire it up, come around the starting line, go up to the starting line, put it in second gear, pump the pressure up. And you had to keep the other thing was it wouldn't idle. It had 6 carburetors on it, and there was no way you could get it to idle, so you had to keep winging the throttle all the time, right? So I go up to the starting line, and I go right to the floor with the throttle, and of course I unlock my knee, and that steps off the clutch, right? So she goes into full lock, and I've got the steering wheel's like this because that's the way race guys had it, right? That image goes about 2 car lengths and goes hard right off the racetrack into the weeds. The weeds are flying everywhere. I crank it back onto the racetrack, give it the gas again, pound myself in the chest with the shifter to get it in high gear, and start pumping on the fuel to keep the fuel pressure up. I get through the lights, I shut the motor off, turn the fuel off, pop it out of gear, and now it's time to shut it off, right? Now it's time to come to a stop. And I'm working the brakes, and they're getting worse and worse all the time. Finally, I hang the wheels over the edge of the racetrack, which was the end of the dirt. I mean, the end of the asphalt. Didn't go into the dirt. I come back, I push it back to the pits, and who's standing there but Paul Candice? He's one of the few people that saw what went on, because it was